When Fields said this yesterday, I think it struck us two very different ways.
I don't think anybody at the end of this upcoming year, because we don't give these things multiple years, I don't think anybody at the end of this upcoming year is going to say, it worked out fine. It's going to be either it was brilliant, it was a masterstroke, we all should have, put more trust and faith into the process, or everybody is going to say, why the heck did we get rid of DK Metcalf and Geno Smith? That was the dumbest thing we've ever done. So, I probably am cut from a cloth where I tend to give deference to the teams because these moves aren't made, I would say, just sort of willy-nilly. But it's a big bet on Sam Darnold, and we'll see on that pick from Pittsburgh. It's a big bet. It takes some stones, that's for sure.
I think where he was going as I re-listened to that, and where my mind went yesterday was for Seattle specifically, as you kind of have written about. Okay, yeah, I could totally see your argument that I don't think it'll be boom or bust. I think it could go multiple ways. But you add in Geno in Vegas, and you add DK in Pittsburgh, and the judgment you're going to have, and add that kind of the plot to the whole mix of it, I do think you're going to have a pretty firm judgment, much like we did with Russell when he went to Denver. It wasn't just how the Seahawks did. It was looking at the disaster and going, yeah, that was the right choice.
Even then, I'm not sure if I agree.
Really?
You think either the
Geno goes down and plays and helps Vegas win 10 games, stabilizes everything, plays at this level, throws for 4,000 yards, completes 70% of his passes.
Yeah, all right, fine. We've we've seen that. I know what that looks like. You think the Raiders are going to win a Super Bowl this year? Compete for a Super Bowl this year? I don't either. Okay, then I don't think that's going to happen. You think the Steelers? The Steelers don't even have freaking quarterback. You think you're going to look at the Steelers and be like, Super Bowl team? That's not to say that Geno Smith and DK Metcalf can't have individual success. They're both good players. Of course they will. I think they will both have individual successes. But are either of them going to lead their team to being a legit Super Bowl contender? Survey says no. Not even that wouldn't even cross my mind. If it happens, tip my cap. I'm wrong.
If they're Pro Bowlers and they play at a high level,
don't care.
And the Seahawks are, just a little bit of execution away at receiver in their passing game, and adding that back to a team that's going to be better. These 5 draft picks, and you find a bona fide stud at guard and another, right? And you add these pieces, and you're like, oh man!
But you wouldn't have all of those things if you hadn't made those trades.
There's 2 draft picks you're getting. That's right. You're getting a couple draft picks for these guys. You're still going to have an 18th pick in this draft, right? You're still going to have some other...
And the money and the things you're able to do. I mean, it's just not that simple. And yeah, you do get a chance to see my notes, Brock, but I'll sum it up pretty quickly. There's 3 possible results next year here. You either get better, worse, or you stay the same, right? I mean, that's true of every team.
Every team.
Either you get better, you get worse, or you stay the same. Is anybody going to complain if they get better? If the Seahawks get better, they won 10 games last year. If they win more than 10 games, you get to 11 games, you're probably if you're not a legit Super Bowl contender, you're probably pretty close to it, right? Somewhere between 11 and 12 wins starts putting you into that Super Bowl contender mold. You're probably going to win your division, or at the very least, you're going to be close. You're going to be in the playoffs. So if they do that, everyone is happy. Yep. Sam Darnold, you probably have another year or 2 of him after that. He's probably played well. You're developing with these 5 new draft. Everything is starting to come together.
Scrimmage, difference makers, and your defense, and all the assets.
So if that happens, everyone's happy.
Yep.
Scenario 2 is actually, I think, the worst case scenario, which is it's all the same. You win 10 games again, maybe it's 9, you don't make the playoffs, or you do and you get beat in the first round. And that to me is the worst case scenario. You're staying right in between, which we've talked about, is that NFL purgatory. But if that happens, it's exactly what I would have expected to have happened if you had kept Geno and DK for more money for each of those 2 guys. I wasn't expecting them to get any better, especially without the draft capital that they added and without the flexibility and payroll that they added. So, okay, the worst case scenario to me is that you stay the same, which is what you were going to do anyway. The other and third scenario, of course, is that, you get worse. Darnold stinks. And, the Cooper Kupp gets hurt. And Kubiak doesn't know all the changes you've made don't work. All right, well, then you're probably going to be in the top 10 in a better quarterback class, and you start thinking, and you know you've got a long-term solution problem. And, oh, by the way, the numbers on Sam Darnold say you can get out of it after a year.
Yeah.
And at least then you know. The Geno problem is that you really don't know. Is he good? Is he bad? Is he this? Is that? Can you win? If Darnold comes in and wins 5-6 games next year, you're like, okay, stinks, move on. Cut him. Which you can do based on the way the salary is structured, and get into the draft and find your next franchise quarterback. I know that's not like a foolproof plan, but at least it's a clear plan as opposed to this intermediate, like, back, who knows? So I know that, hedging your bets is something
I can't argue any of that. I think all of that is a very, very strong
greatest
argument.
hedge.
I think a lot of that is a really strong argument. I think Fields' point is because it is a starting quarterback, because it is Geno, much like it was with Russell, you're going to get to. Remember after you said, once they made that trade, like, this is going to be the greatest evaluation ever, right? Or along those lines. Like, we're going to get to a real chance to see whether Russ should have cooked here, whether Pete was all backwards, whether it was all wrong, whether they held him back, right? And we did, and the whole league did. And we've gotten to see that now for 2, 3, 4 years. I think in the same vein, maybe not as drastic as that, but in the same vein, if Geno throws for 4,000, 70%, cuts down on a few interceptions, leads the Raiders to the playoffs, and the Seahawks are just a little bit short at that position, and Sam takes a step back, I think that there is an opportunity to put some real judgment on that.
Yeah, I guess you're like, there's one scenario.
It is hedged
like
because Geno's 35. I get it. It's hedged there because Geno's 35.
I think if you were to take this plan to one of the, to Stephen Cohen, right, hedge fund manager, and say, hey, look what we've done here, they'd be like, yeah, that's a hedge. Good hedge. Yep. Right? You've sort of accounted for every possibility, and regardless of what happens, you're in a pretty good position, or at least the same position moving forward. And I would argue, by the way, even if they finish roughly the same, they're in a better position because they're not spending as much to do it. They're younger, and they can get out of the deal if they want to with Darnold after a year.
Yeah.
If after a year he's the reason they're short, cool.
Yep.
Then go find somebody else, because I don't believe, I guess some of this is predicated on my belief that Geno was never going to be the guy to take you to the top. And if he wins the Super Bowl before his career is out as a starter, I'll raise my hand and say, okay, I was wrong. Good for him. That's incredible. I was wrong. But I think it's a pretty safe bet that at age 35, the impending Super Bowl is not coming for Geno Smith.
Yeah, I think this is one of those situations that you would win this argument. If this is presented in front of a court with Field. Yes, you would win it. Much like, is that how you celebrated yesterday?
Pretty much, yeah. That's pretty much how I celebrated my goal.
Yes. And this is one of those situations where, because we are so intimate with it and we talk about every one of these details and we know all the layers of it for years and years and years, whereas the Field, as bright as he is, and certainly, his 25 minutes yesterday expressed that he knows his stuff, but he just doesn't know it as intimately. I don't think he knows that they have hedged in all of these ways, that the details of these contracts really, in so many ways, are 1 and 2 year bets to see if this is really, the guy, or it's, a role in this situation. Try to give Mike McDonald the kind of guys that he wants, but never sacrificing the opportunity that if Devin Witherspoon and Charles Cross and some of your young studs are great, then you can sign them to the long-term extensions and really build a more concrete foundation.
Yeah.
Because right now it feels, right, and I think this is true, there's nobody under contract through 2029. Nobody on this whole roster is signed past 2028. So you have given yourself, I think, a lot of flexibility. You've given Mike a lot of flexibility over the years to make sure you got your kind of guys. Now,
there is a caveat to this whole thing. So I, again, wrote that up. I used that word flexibility, I believe, in the piece I wrote last night, seattlesports.com. There's a caveat. I've got to put a caveat into all of this, Brock. I don't want to make the whole story about this, so it's really just it's an asterisk. And that is, all of this doesn't matter if you don't fix the offensive line. All of this is bunk. It doesn't matter. You're not getting better. You're not staying this. Like, you got to fix the offensive line. And they've now opted not to fix it through free agency. That's fine. Or the trade market so far. They've opted not to go down that road for whatever reason. So you have to be right that you can fix it, A, through the draft, and B, through coaching and development.
Yeah.
That's a big bet. And that, to me, as much as I love the bet on Geno and DK and Darnold and all that, and I think you've hedged it really well, I don't see what the hedging is here. This feels to me like, well, this is a big gamble. This is a parlay. Like, either all these things come together and work even though they haven't before, or it blows up everything else we've been trying to do.
Yeah, at this point, I really, and I have said this kind of over the last month or so, to try to answer the question of why. Why have they not signed any of these guys? And yet another one that was in for a visit signs with the Saints yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And if this doesn't work, if this structure, if this kind of reset with coach, coordinator, line coach, run game man, like if this doesn't work, Salk, I don't know what is left. I really don't know.
Right.
You know what
yeah, there's one other thing that's left. Investing in it. Taking more of your salary cap percentage and putting it towards the offensive line. That's the one thing you haven't done. You've done everything else. That's the one thing you haven't done. And again, this is different from spend more money. This is allocate your resources. And I know every time I say this, people go, well, money, spending money and allocating resources are different things.
They would love for Abe Lucas and Charles Cross to take that next step, Salt. And they would love to lock Charles Cross down and actually be the first guy maybe on this roster.
That'd be great.
Extended beyond 2028 and sign him to a 5-year, $100 million deal. And they would love Abe Lucas in that knee and in that tendon and everything else to feel as good as it, by all accounts, did at the end of the year. His offseason training feels, and they could lock him down. And they would love to draft one of 3 guys at number 18 this year that they've got really graded to fit there and spend that kind of money. And literally, I think in 6 to 7 months, do exactly what you said. Allocate significant millions and millions and millions of dollars because they believe those guys are those kind of players. They've not been able to do that for the last number of years. They did not believe Damian Lewis was that kind of player.
Yeah.
They didn't believe it. They didn't believe that other than Will Fries, anyone in this market was that kind of player. And, you know, I would agree with you. And that's about those guys earning it, not about giving it to them. Mm-hmm. It's about them earning that and proving that and building that trust with this new staff.